This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, we've packed a number of shows together to give you some highlights. I know you're going to enjoy the show. Thank you for being with us today.
Welcome, Tony. This is Tony Lopes. He is our guest today from Dirty Boots Capital. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Deana. This is going to be a fun conversation.
I'm excited. As we mentioned, we were kind of doing some pre-show prep. I love anyone with a Boston accent. I picked it up 3 seconds into a convo. Pure entertainment for me. The East Coast is a little bit like a foreign country. I'm a Seattle West Coast girl, even though I live in Denver now. So it's kind of like watching an amusement park, just the East Coast. I love it.
We could create a show just with my crazy accent, my crazy Boston accent. That could be a 30-minute show right there.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. Most of you are probably listening to podcasts, but Tony had the Boston hat on, so he makes no bones about the fact where he's from, which I love. All right. Well, Tony, let's get into this. You have a lot of experience. As the show, we send our guests kind of, some information, getting ready to figure out how we can best leverage the experience of our guests. Tony sends me like a 9-page bullet point summary of all the things that he can share, which for me is like a total gift hosting a podcast. We can go anywhere with this. So folks,
Yes.
buckle up. Tony, give us a little background about who you are, how you got started, and then we'll get to the now.
Sure. So I personally like to share my story in a very relatable way to the audience, to your listeners, because I, at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same thing of, having a certain amount of wealth, having a certain amount of freedom in our lives to be able to do the fun things we like to do with our family. So, I share with folks, I'm no different than anybody else. My parents actually migrated to this country prior to me being born. So they came to this country with very little. And when I was born, me and my siblings, they handed down the tablet of, because they saw this country as a country of great opportunity,
Mhm.
they handed down the tablet of go to school, get a great education, you'll get a great job, and you'll be set for life. Which I think many of the listeners and the viewers can resonate with. That's a very familiar mantra that we have, right? Well, I went to school, I got a great education. I got 2 degrees, a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and an MBA, 2 great degrees.
Great
Uh,
combo.
right. I went to work at a great company, and then I was laid off. And I was like, "Well, wait a minute. This wasn't part of the mantra I was handed down from my immigrant parents who saw so much opportunity." So that was my awakening is really what it was. And I said, I got to do different. I wasn't financially independent at that time. I had to go find another job, which uh, all of us can relate to. And so I found another job. But at that point, I said, I have to do something different. I had a little bit of familiarity with real estate investing. My father, as an immigrant, had done some real estate investing. So I had some amount of familiarity. And so that's the route I took is part-time, after work, nights, weekends, I started investing in real estate. And I didn't start like in a huge way. I bought a quad, a 4-unit building, did some amount of fixing up on that, rented it out. From that cash flow and that equity, I still have the building today actually, but during that time, I used that equity and I used that cash flow to start building some spec homes. Again, all while working my job during the day. So I was building a couple of spec homes, nights and weekends. And from there, I took that cash flow, invested it back into the multi space because I saw the multifamily space
Yeah.
really as a great avenue to create not only appreciation for myself, wealth for myself over a long period of time, but also this great thing we call cash flow. And so I continue to buy multifamilies again so for your audience, one of the things I like to hit on is, I didn't start doing this like buying, 100-unit buildings, with $10 million. I did not have that. I came from a very simple upbringing. So for me, I started with small buildings, and eventually that allowed me to amass enough cash flow to allow me to retire from my day job at the ripe age of 44 years old, which
That's
I'm very
amazing.
proud of.
That's amazing. So
And
this
at
is
the end of the
income replacement. Were all of your like single family and small multis? I mean, the spec homes, were they all in the Boston area where you lived?
they were actually up in New Hampshire, just north of Boston. Yeah.
So what was the time period from the time you started this till the time you were able to replace your cash flow, your income through cash flow at
Oh,
44?
about 15 years.
Okay, that's
15
helpful
years.
and
Yeah.
reasonable, you know?
Yeah.
You hear
Again,
all of these headlines of like, 0 to 2,000 units in 6, 8 months, which is amazing for some people. But I just
yeah.
think I love how realistic your story is. And it's also kind of takes the tension out of it in terms of like, hey, I can do this. I'm not going to jump off into oblivion thinking I'm going to become, this cash flow king or queen in 6 years, even, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
totally
You're,
doable, but I mean, 6 months.
you're absolutely right, Deana. And that's why I like to start there with my story, because I think a lot of your viewers, a lot of your listeners can relate to a lot of different aspects of that story. Right. So, but that just kind of, freed up my time. Now that I've replaced my W-2 income, my job income with cash flow, which is a very doable thing. Now I can go off and do all sorts of other crazy things. And so, yeah, we can expand on all the different things I touch these days.
Yeah. So what is Dirty Boots Capital? That's the name of your company, but what do you guys do? Where did that fit into the timeline of the 15 years and what does that look like now?
Sure. So to break down Dirty Boots Capital, so Dirty Boots came from the fact that, years ago, I could just walk on a job site, get my boots dirty, looking at the job site, seeing what I have to fix in terms of, windows, doors, roof, whatever. I could get my boots dirty just walking on a job site. Today, things are a little different. We have things like migration patterns that we need to understand. So I get my boots dirty walking through those reports of migration patterns, right? Financial reports, macro reports, what's happening in the economy. Today we have to be so much more vigilant and savvy in terms of what's happening within the economy, whether we're having a recession on our doorstep or not. Do we have inflation for longer? We have to understand these things better. So I get my boots dirty walking through those types of reports.
Love it.
Separately, capital, when I do my coaching, so part of Dirty Boots Capital is coaching. I provide coaching to folks who either want to active or passively invest. So part of the capital piece is so many people have come to me over the years and say, Tony, I don't have enough money to invest to start being an active investor and buying real estate. I say, that's okay. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And come to find out, they're a contractor of some sort, or they're a real estate agent, or that they have some other skills that complement being an active investor. And so I say, that's okay. I get you may not have the capital. Why don't you partner as an LLC or a partnership of some sort with somebody else that does bring the capital, but may not have the time or your skills to be able to do the rest of the stuff?
Hmm.
So now that kind of like blows their mind and they start to think, okay, yeah. And oh, by the way, that makes it easier when it's two people doing something, so to speak, for the first time. You're not going alone at this. So one person may bring the capital in terms of the money, another person may bring the capital in terms of the knowledge, what they hold between their ears in terms of how to fix things, or maybe how to list an apartment for rent, or dealing with contracts. Whereas the person with the money, maybe they just have the money and they don't really know the other piece, or don't want to deal with the other piece.
Hmm.
So that's where the Dirty Boots Capital came from. So we help people not only with the coaching that we do, but also educational blogs, videos, and also helping people with syndication, get into syndication if that's a route they want to get into. So we never push anybody into any particular situation, but if syndication is something good for them, we help them figure that out.
So I have a question about the Dirty Boots and what the reports that you're wading through. Can you share any of the top line report titles in case anyone is interested in looking at some of those things? Which are the ones that you find yourself in the most?
Yeah, so the one I find the most interesting that I look at pretty frequently is the 210 spread for the treasuries. It's a Fred report, and there's a lot of reports put out by the Federal Reserve. They have a database called the Fred database. You can go online, access a whole bunch of different reports. But I like the 210 spread report. So just Google Fred 210 spread. That report will come up. And when you look at it, it gives you 50 years of history. And so, wow, that is such a great crystal ball to be able to help us understand where we've been and where we may
Mhm.
be going in the future. And so every time we dip below the 0 line on that report, it indicates a certain amount of badness. Okay. And then you can see tracking every time we dip below that line, soon thereafter, we fall into a recession.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
come out of the recession, it dips below the 0, we go into another recession. It goes back up. We have these business cycles. So where are we today? We're below the line. We're below 0. It's starting to track back up, which is a good sign. However, 50 years of data is telling us this is an indicator that we are going to see some sort of a recession, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's super important to watch that metric and help us understand where we are. We can't live with our head in the sand. We have to understand some of these things and why we're investing in the multifamily space. Super important indicator.
Yeah, so this is the kind of information I think listeners find really helpful is like the name of this report. Any other reports that you can share that we can point listeners to do their own, kicking around in the dirt?
Ah, I wasn't prepared for that one. So I like to look at the home ownership rate, and
Mhm.
not just home ownership rate, so to speak, of what we're seeing in this country. I also like to look at other countries as data points, right? So right now we are at 66% home ownership rate in the United States, which, okay. However, that's trending down, right? Because of the interest rate environment. There's a lot of things that will drive that chart down. So I look at that chart, but looking at other countries, so we're at 66%. I look at another industrialized country like Germany. Sometimes we compare ourselves from manufacturing base or an industrial base. We compare ourselves to Germany. Well, Germany only has a 47% home ownership rate.
Huh.
So they obviously have many, many, many more years on us. They're a much older country. They're a very industrialized country, which makes them similar to us. But it just kind of makes you just like you said, Dina, it makes you go, what does that mean for the future of the United States? You can
Yes.
also look at Japan, right? A lot of headlines out there, a lot of speak is about the Japanification of America because we hold this very high debt to GDP, not as high as Japan, but we're trending in that direction.
Mhm.
So, along the lines of the Japanification of the United States, I look at, well, what's their home ownership rate? And their home ownership rate is 55%. So, lower than what we have in the United States.
But not trailing too dramatically. Tony, thank you so much. You were so great, so knowledgeable. Love the accent. Could talk to you all day.
You're so
Woo,
kind,
my
Dina. I
home
appreciate you.
is car guys.
Excellent. Thank you for having me, Dina. I appreciate you.
Marc Kuhn, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, well, great. I'm excited to hear your story. Sounds like you are a entrepreneur at the heart and soul, which I think a lot of our listeners are going to identify with. So why don't you give us just a little background, tell us about your family, and then we'll kind of get into the meat of what you want to discuss today.
Yeah, so I guess me today, I got three beautiful little kids, 10, 8-year-old girls, and then I got a 3-year-old boy. That keep me busy, but they're also my pride and joys. And then I have my wife that I've been with for 12 years now. So we've gotten to experience my entrepreneurial journey together, and she basically fills in all the weaknesses that I have. As an entrepreneur, you can have many things on your mind and many things going at the same time, and she kind of picks up the pieces behind me and keeps the ship floating and keeps everything together. Like
Wow, what a
glue.
team. So let's
So
talk about professionally. Like, where did you come from and where are you at now? And how did you pivot there? Are you where you thought you would be?
That's a great question. And, I was even just 6 years ago, I just poured concrete for a living. That was really what I did to make money. And that's what I know the best. So I grew up right next to my dad. My parents were divorced at a young age, age 6. And my dad went and opened his own construction company. And I stayed with mom while we went to school, and construction was every summer. That's just what I got used to. So poured a lot of concrete, some carpentry projects. We built some things, garages, whatever. But I was always mainly in the concrete business. And I guess you fast forward a little bit. I did go to college for 4 years I went to high school, went to college for 4 years. Dad's like, I don't think you want to be pouring concrete for the rest of your life. So of course, go to college. And I think what I learned was drinking was fun. And I'm still 12 credits short of a degree. So I didn't really advance my career any further. Well, here's the deal. My last year of college, I went for construction management. I was going for business management, and then I pivoted. I'm like, well, I love construction, so why don't I do construction management? Well, you figure out that construction management has nothing to do with actually like physically doing construction, which I knew the most. So I realized that I was working full time at this time. I got a fiance at the time. We bought a house because it was '08 and the houses were cheap. I think they were giving away like $8,000 if you bought a house. Obama or something was doing that at that time. So I was like, hey, we can get a house really affordably. We got in for zero money pretty much. And I ended up getting fired from my job 2 weeks after we closed. And
Perfect.
yeah. Well,
Gosh.
yeah. And I had a W-2 job. So my dad didn't fire me. I butt heads with my dad. And that last year of college, I was working a W-2 job and working about 45 hours a week, plus going to school full time. And so my heart just, obviously I lost my job. I'm still going to school. I had to do something. And so at that point, I aborted everything. And I, installed a fart fan for somebody in their house. And I was just trying to come up. That was my first job. And I was just trying to piece together money to make sure I could get this mortgage paid. Right. And my fiance, her parents are like, oh my God, what is this guy doing? Bought a house. This is going to be the worst thing ever. I had a lot of burden on me to make it through that time. And it's weird though, as an entrepreneur, I think, people always talk about being an entrepreneur. They don't commit to being an entrepreneur. And at that point, I didn't commit. I just had to get desperate in desperate times. And I think that's what, and I just committed. I was like, I'm going to do construction. I'm going to make as much money as I can. I'm going to make the mortgage. Everything's going to be good. And I'm going to work my ass off. And I think that's what some entrepreneurs, they'll be working their job, and then slowly though, like I already had a mortgage at that age. I was 22 years old and I had a fiance, but lifestyles just get more expensive. Now you have private schools and you got kids coming into the picture. Our lives get more and more expensive, which gets harder for us to go on. And, we can't quit our job now. We're reliant on the income. We can't go do our vision and take it. So I always try to inspire younger entrepreneurs. It's like, before you live the lifestyle inflation life, which most younger people live today, it's like, commit to what you want to do in life. And before all that happens, don't wait. I mean, the sooner you can do it, the easier it becomes.
Something I want to highlight that I think is actually a gift. It's kind of like the fire of desperation that is the baptizing of every entrepreneur. It's like, until you get to that point where it is sink or swim, do or die, you got to set your forehead like flint and just move forward. I feel like at that point, you're then able to prove to yourself and to others, if needed, that you actually have what it takes to kind of do this. So we can look at those transitional points as, man, this was the most unfortunate thing that ever happened to me, or they can be the greatest gift. I mean, was that a pivotal moment for you that you look back to and you said, man, I had more in the tank than I thought that I did?
Yeah. At my W-2 job that I had, it was just very, very complacent and just took a lot of time. And it's like, we grew up very lower class, and my mom lived on food stamps, and it's just, we had everything we needed and nothing more. And I just always had this thing where I wanted more from life. So I worked my tail off for my dad I bought my own cell phone. I paid for my own car insurance. You do all these things, tabs. And I was living a lifestyle inflation when I was 14 years old. I had to pay for a cell phone bill. And so I had bills that I had to cater for. And I think that makes you more hungry. I just wanted more out of life at the end of the day. I wanted everything every other kid had, and their parents were paying for it. So I just needed to get creative with how I had to commit to that. And I think
Mhm.
that was just my motivation to try to fit in.
So at this point is when you launched your career into construction. Talk to us about what you learned as an entrepreneur and where you are now. I know that's kind of a big gap you're covering, but I know
Mhm.
that you have some really well thought out ideas around succeeding as an entrepreneur. I'd love you to share those.
Yeah, well, I got really two main points on how I've pivoted from where I started and where I ended up now. And I want to mention this one first, and it's more or less I got really curious. So I got curious about owning a business. Like, hey, can I do this? I didn't know anything about it. My dad never taught me the business side of things. He taught me all the trades and the craft. But I think you, as an entrepreneur, you have to be very uncomfortable. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to screw up my taxes. I'm going to screw up the accounting. I'm going to whatever. I'm going to run out of money. But I got really curious about business and how, how do you build a business? Why do the super wealthy all have businesses? And so curiousness also led me into real estate, because 6 years down the road, I started getting curious, about real estate. And then Grant Cardone pops up on your phone, and then you're like, wow, and this is what the super wealthy do. And they live this wonderful life and they make money while they sleep, and you start hearing all these different things. But I always come back to, anytime I want to start something new or I want to go somewhere, I always remain very curious and very humble. Like, I'm always asking questions to other people. I do a podcast with higher level people. I love just being around those people and being inspired by them, and getting to ask them high level questions that you can't just ask your colleague right next to you or somebody else, right? So curiousness is probably the number one thing how I've gotten to. Obviously, you got to take commitment to action, and you can't just learn everything, but being curious and then taking action has gotten to me where I'm at. And then really, like, the second part of this, or like the three things I really want to talk about, is using leverage. So I was a concrete kid. Like, I didn't know a lot about business, and I don't think college taught me a whole lot about how to run a business. How to open the LLC, EIN, all this stuff was foreign to me.
Why isn't that a business class? It definitely should be. You
I,
know,
I yeah,
A
I
to
don't
Z,
know.
open a business.
Yeah, they teach you strategies and they teach you different things. I was just on a podcast with a president of a university here, and asking those specific questions. How do you adopt AI, and how do you just the basics? I mean, and at the end of the day, how can I learn from TikTok faster than I can learn from a college? Scrolling reels on how to open an LLC and get business insurance and go into business. It is bizarre. I don't know.
That must have been a really interesting conversation with a college president, because I think a lot of folks are saying, what future is higher ed with the implementation of AI? That's another podcast, but I want the link
Yeah.
to your interview.
Well, I will send you the link. So I'm from Thompson, North Dakota. This is a very small town of 1,000 people. Well, Greg Brockman is the president of OpenAI. He created ChatGPT. He created Dolly for Google. He created all these things, and he's from our small hometown up here in North Dakota. And yeah, the University of North Dakota, the president, Andy Armacost, who I just did an interview with, got to interview him a few weeks ago. I've been trying to get him on a podcast, but you can about imagine how hard Greg Brockman is to pin down on a podcast lately. But I'm going to keep after it, and hopefully one day I do get him on. Brilliant guy. He didn't even finish college though, and Andy shared that with me. He's like, I don't know, 20 credits short, 30 credits short of a degree, and it doesn't matter though. He he obviously is doing just fine now, but he created Stripe and all these things from a small town in North Dakota. So there you can educate your listeners. Go search who Greg Brockman is. He's a genius of a guy. But and I think though, when I was talking about leverage, and I'm not talking like Dave Ramsey stuff here. Like, I'm not going to say not borrow any leverage, but you have to leverage. You'll realize that the super wealthy, when you get curious about that, they're leveraging three things: time, money, and media. And not everyone in media, but I think it's very important as the society grows up with a phone in their hand, that they're all watching. Marketing's changing, and it's always changing, right? Like it's drastically always changing, but you have to get used to media. So, but let's first hit on time. And time is leveraging through, there's lots of solopreneurs, but then, you realize that the big solopreneurs all have these team of VAs behind them, or, there's someone behind them. Maybe it's a wife, maybe it's whatever, but it ends up always developing to be a team because they realize that they can't always produce everything and they have to leverage their time to go and do bigger and more important tasks. And they should be doing that. So, I think one of my regrets in business is not hiring like an assistant. Like I ended up doing all these, trying to line up every meeting, and then you're in a meeting and its schedule changes. And, as you get more, not important, but like busy, it just, your schedule fills up. You need someone to keep you more prepared, and you end up getting a lot more done and advancing your career. So you don't even need to go hire like a top-notch $100,000, $200,000 a year guy. You can literally hire yourself an assistant, leverage yourself. And so just, you'll realize though that some of the most successful business owners I know spend very little time at their company. They lead, they manage, they provide, they ask their leaders to provide solutions to problems, and they just lead them to the right answer that they feel that lines in a value with the company. So, I always had to ask myself, did I have a company? Can I leave for a month and will it operate without me? Or do I just have a business that owns me?
Good question. Yeah, because that is a really great way to just, structure things that you
Yeah.
can. I mean, it's kind of the same concept of working on your business versus working in your business, but I like that
Mhm.
question.
Yeah. And I always ask myself that. And I think someone told me, it's like, hey, can you leave for a month and come back and everything's good? It's like, well, yeah, if my wife's here, or if somebody's here, or if, you know what I mean? It's like, no, how about like if you just leave? And, that's in 2016, I ended up having a panic attack just because um, I wasn't sleeping at night, and I wasn't healthy. I wasn't taking care of myself physically, I guess. I was in shape. I poured concrete for a living, so it's like I'm in shape, but I was not physically healthy, which means you're not mentally healthy. And I was just ending up doing everything. That's why I was the guy, the answer for every problem. And after a while, you realize that eats on you. So I made a pivotal point in about 2016, 2017 to get interested in real estate, other sources of income, and then actually build a business that can operate without me. And so where I failed there though, it took me 3 years to really figure out that I didn't know what a mentor was,
Mm.
or I didn't have anyone to ask questions. And so I was just trying to navigate books, and I'll do it all myself.
In terms of timeline, you're still running your own construction company. Is that correct? Or is it concrete, or both? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. It was construction. We were doing general contracting and concrete work, basically those two
okay.
specific trades.
And you have this epiphany. I need to figure out how to make money when I sleep and how to create a self-propelling flywheel in my business in the event I leave for a month. So then you dive into books and education, and you're realizing you need a mentor, but you don't know what a mentor is. Okay, keep going. This is good.
Yeah. And well, the books, and like you can do everything yourself. You can educate the hell out of yourself online, right? Like
Mm.
I spent 3 years trying to figure out business again by myself and just implementing all these strategies. And my team was like, all right, where are we going this week? Like, what are you focused on? And it's like, this week it's KPIs, next week it's leadership. And it's like, it depends what book I'm reading. And really I needed, it fast tracked in 2020 because we hired a business coach, an EOS implementer.
Nice.
So entrepreneurial operating system, and it can run a coffee shop, it can run $1 billion business. And once we got online, that's when we started forming a board within the company, which is just higher level people in each department. There's one person in charge of marketing, one head to chop, as they would call it in EOS. One person, that's heading the financial department, one person that leads operate, it's like specific areas instead of, oh, how many arrows point at the business owner? Well, usually too many. And that's why you're reliant. Or it could be the business owner themselves, just as their own worst enemy. Just they're not willing to give it up. And that's where a lot of businesses get stuck with, I think I just seen a statistic that 92% of businesses do under $1 million in revenue. It's usually due to the operator themselves not willing to give up control. So once we got hit EOS, we've literally 10x the business since then. So it's funny how you get in front of the.
Let's park on this just for a second. That's a big comment you just made. So EOS, you mentioned it briefly, Entrepreneurial Operating System. You bring in, it's Gino Wickman's system for the listeners. I'm sure other guests have discussed it too. So you specifically implemented this. You hired an implementer. And so what was the time frame for that? You bring it into your business and you say, we're going to hire you for X amount of time.
Yeah, in the EOS system, you usually, like, people will try to do it themselves. I recommend not. I mean, it might cost you $60,000, but it's really a 2-year deal. You graduate after 2 years.
That was my next question, is if you would share the cost. So that's great. Okay. Your investment of 60 grand, you 10x your business. That's amazing. That took 2 years.
Yeah. Yep. And he's really your cheapest employee you'll ever hire, or he or she, whoever implementer is, but they were really a mentor on how to run a business, because they've ran many different businesses. They might be doing 20 businesses at the same time. And you get open about your issues and solving things quickly, and as a group, not as a business owner. Instead of you making all the decisions, it puts the decisions on a group. Yeah. You align like, as an entrepreneur, we have all sorts of ideas, right? It's just like, which one is our company going to follow, right? It's got to follow our values, and it's got to follow, everyone's got to be on board. Because if you can get everyone on board, man, that's when we started really steamrolling ahead. And actually, we were doing $2 million in revenue, 2 to 3 in 2016, and 22 we did 25. So it's just like the alignment of where we wanted to go.
It's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, I'd say, hey, follow us on LinkedIn and
how can people find you? A great way.
Yeah. So Marc Kuhn, MARCKUHN. You can just search me on LinkedIn. I'm on there all the time. I have a email that I do every Saturday. It's on Substack. You'll also be able to find that on LinkedIn, called Unfollow the Herd is the theme of mine. So you'll see that throughout my content, but you can follow me everywhere. YouTube. I teach how people can creatively finance projects, and you don't need a lot of money to do what we're doing, I promise you. And, YouTube, Instagram, all of the social media platforms.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.